Hey guys, so me and Tom are off on our jollies this week, which means neither of us is behind our desk to pump out a full-length video for you guys. But we didn't want to leave you with absolutely nothing for the week, so we thought we'd update you on one of our more popular series, that being our Who Can Beat the Mountain videos, because a lot of people are asking about it on YouTube and in our Discord server. We've also put all the current mountain videos into this small compilation, because me and Tom keep finding suggestions for part 1 in part 3, and suggestions for part 3 in part 1, and suggestions for part 2 in part 1, and on and on and on, and while it's funny to us, it's kind of getting hard to keep track of now. As for the future of this series, don't worry guys, we've heard you. For now though, we're letting the topic rest a little as we have kind of milked the crap out of it, and that's even before this compilation video. Once a bit of time has passed and fatigue has worn off, and we've delivered those updated Robin Lannister videos we promised you a while back, we intend to bring back this series, starting with a combined version of the 3 original videos combined into one quote-unquote ultimate edition, if you will. Rewritten and all voiced at one consistent pace and in the same location, with some more polished reasoning and explanations, especially for those older videos. Along with also ranking the cans in order of most capable of beating the mountain to those who can but are going to struggle. And then the can'ts in order of absolute dead meat up to might pull it off with a bit of a miracle. So if you have thoughts on the order these characters should go in for the 2 categories, feel free to let us know in the comments along with your reasoning. Others' insight is always handy. Anyway guys, take care and we'll see you with something brand new next week hopefully. Fade it in, Tom. Tom, same rules as always, this is a trial by combat scenario. Fighters pick their weapons and armor, and using the environment and playing dirty is more than fair game. First up, for the ones who can, we have a non-vengeful Oberyn. This guy can beat the mountain, because this guy did beat the mountain. He was our first choice in the original video because he's the most bloody obvious choice. Only the most die-hard Oberyn hater would claim he didn't have the original fight in the bag, and were it not for his emotional state and the secondary objective of humiliating Tywin, he would have killed the mountain much quicker and with far less donating of his brains. We already know Oberyn's MO with this guy, so I won't go into massive depth. Spear to compensate for his reach, light armor to maintain his stamina while the mountain fatigued, keep a safe distance, and wear the mountain down like water on, well, a mountain. Then just to be safe, he threw a bit of poison on his spear to ensure he only needed one tiny nick of the mountain skin to guarantee that even if he went down, Gregor as a person at the very least, if not the mountain as a whole, died a horrible, painful death. Damn it, Qyburn. We just need our Dornish prince going for a quick kill and not a purposefully dragged out affair that ends in head splats. This goes all the way from Oberyn taking the kill shot if it presents itself rather than merely trying to subdue Gregor, and also not being fancy-schmancy about the poison on his weapon. A little known fact to those who only watch the show is the poison Oberyn used was purposefully altered to delay its effects and extend Gregor's suffering. In normal circumstances, manticore venom kills almost instantaneously, which translates to if a drop hits your bloodstream, you might, if you're lucky, have about 30 seconds to tell your loved ones goodbye. Now get some of that on your spear, my good Viper. So yeah, moral of the story with our first pick is, stop fucking around, Oberyn, and kill that monster already. And our first choice of the fighters who can't, it's Ned Stark. The cat isn't really out of the bag on how good a fighter Ned is, and the opinions differ greatly. We've got 2 show-only fights to go on, and in both fights he's up against the 2 greatest swordsmen to grace Westeros, and he to some degree holds his own. But that's it. Ned famously didn't fight in tourneys, and unlike characters like Dane, Oberyn, Jaime, and Mushew's older version to give others a chance in our videos, Barristan Selmy, he doesn't have this legendary reputation as a warrior following him around. Barristan does acknowledge, at least in the show, that Ned has killed some great warriors, and people do know him for defeating Dane, but even Ned himself in the books acknowledges it wasn't down to his skill as a warrior, and the show has all but confirmed this. Unless George decides to pull a 180, God hurry up with the damn books please George, people prefer it when we reference the books. However, backstab or not, Ned lasted long enough against Dane to allow for the backstab, while others did not. This alone tells us he's good to the point of at least above average. Then we've got this show-only fight with Jaime Jamie, and let's clear something up. This moment where Jamie looks flustered isn't him losing the upper hand, especially if you're considering both iterations of the character. This is less a case of, oh no, I'm in trouble here, and more a case of, he's better than I thought, I've actually got to try, haven't I? Still, no disrespect to Ned, that is Jamie, the once-in-a-generation talent he's pressing enough to warrant effort. So, with this in mind, could Ned take Gregor down in his prime? Ned's got access to high-quality plate armor, being Warden of the North and all, and he's also got access to a Valyrian steel sword in ice. On paper, this sounds great, but as much as it's been over-exaggerated that plate armor slows you down massively, it does slow you down a fraction and certainly compromises agility and movement range to a very small degree. Ice is made of Valyrian steel and therefore lighter than normal steel. It's still a whopping big greatsword and would be very difficult for anyone to wield with any kind of finesse. Ned famously only used it for ceremonial purposes. It's that unwieldy to a man of his size. Anyone not in the Mountains League size-wise cannot play Gregor at his own game anyway, that being heavy armor and take it away Sandor.
And a big fucking sword.
The Mountain's blueprint for smaller guys is to use these strengths against him, leverage agility and mobility, and let the Mountain's armor and sword weigh him down once he starts to fatigue. Don't think that because this is a simple, common-sense sounding strategy that any Joe schlub can pull this off. The skill and physicality required to employ this tactic through to the finish against such a monster would need to be prodigious. So with this in mind, Ned's got to keep it light and use a sword he can wield with finesse. And do we think Ned is good enough, or dirty enough in Bron's case, to pull this off? No, not really. Ned is smart and from what we've seen quite scrappy and capable, and that will carry him through a good chunk of what will be a very long fight. But he isn't one of the best there is, and he's likely to make that one misstep that Bron also fears making, and well...
And I'm dead.
My views on Ned versus the Mountain are similar to my views on Loris versus the Mountain. The Mountain will win, but take solace, Ned fans, knowing that it won't be easy for him. Our second pick of those who can, it's Sandor Clegane. While not as big and strong as his brother, Sandor has traded some of his size and strength for far superior skill and cunning, while still remaining big and strong enough to stay in the Mountain's league of physicality. Guy clearly understands how to spec his character sheet. He's one of the few people in Westeros who can straight up stonewall Gregor's attacks and respond in kind, removing the need for pure evasion and the need to play the long game. Then add to this, he's an extremely deadly and skilled swordsman, so much so that George R.R. Martin considered him the best active swordsman in Westeros after Jaime was taken down a peg. Or, well, a hand. And Sandor backs up the author's words repeatedly in the show and books. Size, strength, and decent sword skills is a great combo, but size, strength, and legendary sword skills? That's even better. Then add to this that Sandor's hatred for Gregor is such that he would probably behead the Stranger, which is the Westerosi Grim Reaper, in front of its wife and children before allowing himself to die before his brother is dealt with. That kind of raw grit allowed him to land several blows that would have been kill shots had his brother actually been alive during their confrontation in the show.
Fucking die!
And even made him get past his fear of fire, which, as we see, is a bit of a sore spot for him. With these factors in mind, the Hound is without a doubt one of the safest bets you could make if you need a champion to take down this beast. And our second offering of dead meat, it's Beric and Thoros. Hey, this is new, Tom, a team pick. Do they allow team picks in a trial by combat? It's fun to discuss anyway. However, even as a team, these two don't stand a chance. Beric conducted himself admirably against the Hound during their duel, and isn't a horrendous warrior by any means. He was trusted by Ned to lead the capture of the Mountain over Loris Tyrell, a noteworthy warrior in his own right, which implies he's definitely got some skill in both command and combat. However, the fight with the Hound cannot be taken without a huge pinch of salt. The Hound was deathly afraid of fire, and having a flaming sword swung at him over one of the non-flaming variety would have absolutely affected his ability to focus. Would he have killed Beric immediately without the flames? Probably not. Beric did seem to actually be carrying himself with his skill, but it likely would have been over far quicker for him against a non-frightened Sandor. Then there's Thoros. Thoros is actually known to be a pretty damn good fighter, especially when he was younger. However, in his old age, he's known more for his parlor trick of lighting his sword on fire to fight with, and is a bit of a drunk. luck. Even combined, these two don't make a force that can beat the Mountain. How do we know this? Well, the Mountain killed Beric not once but twice in the actual story, and Thoros was close by and unable to do anything but hide and bring Beric back from the dead. Normally, when you throw in another fighter, the odds are cut by more than half for the lone warrior, but Gregor doesn't really have that issue thanks to his size and equipment. His size means a couple of average guys will likely bounce off him if they try to tackle him together. Remember, he is 8 feet tall and 400 pounds, and his greatsword is a battlefield weapon made for multiple opponents that provides him with 6 foot of reach and a huge kill zone in front of him. He only needs to take one of these guys out when they try to mob him to make it a very bad day for the lone survivor. Whether their swords are flaming or not, Beric and Thoros are rocking swords of a standard length, meaning they've got a lot of gap to close, and unless by some miracle one can make it behind the monster without getting cloven in two, they're going to struggle to deal with that shield and armor the Mountain is fond of. While they are both formidable and crafty, they are not Barristan's caliber of swordsman or Bronze level of dirty. I honestly love these two characters, but come on, they are screwed. Thoros will only be able to bring back Beric so many times, and it'll only be a matter of time before the Mountain figures out that he needs to have Beric quartered before dealing with Thoros. He's not that stupid.
Could you bring back a man without a head?
I don't think it works that way, child.
And our third original pick of those who can, it's Sir Arthur Dane. Touted as the finest swordsman ever, by the finest swordsman ever, is 7 hells of an accolade. Dane is one of the greatest warriors in Westeros and definitely in the Golden Three when it comes to swordsmanship alone. This guy has actually beaten an opponent compared to Gregor Clegane on the savagery front in the Smiling Knight. Though it should be noted, Smiley and Greg don't actually have anything else in common besides their savagery. Smiley was known for his skill and Greg known for his monstrous size, but it's still helpful in showing us Dane knows how to deal with monsters. Not only that, but Dane is rocking Dawn, a sword that has properties similar to Valyrian steel that some speculate is even better. Ooh, I wonder if there's a video in that, Tom. And before we charge on, I just want to clear up something many think makes this a stomp for Dane. Dawn and Valyrian steel doesn't cut through plate armor like cloth. This is highly likely in-universe hyperbole used to hype up Dawn and by extension Valyrian steel. It's a logical fallacy that they have this property. The times we've seen Valyrian steel go through armor effortlessly in the story has been against light armor, not full plate. Something not completely out of the capabilities of a regular well-made sword.
But Brienne cut another sword in two with Oathkeeper.
I hear you typing, remember I have powers. Again, this is perfectly within the capabilities of a regular sword and is actually more dependent on how worn, tired and warped the steel of your opponent's weapon is rather than the strength of your own. Valyrian steel swords and by extension Dawn are lighter and more nimble than regular swords and never lose their edge. So yeah, you can swing at plate without risking dulling the blade for sure, and there's definitely something magical about them. But lightsabers, they are not. If they were, no one would have ever been able to cross swords with one without also wielding a Valyrian steel weapon of their own. And as we've seen, this just isn't the case. When it does happen, it can only be regarded as a fluke, not a consistent property. This is a tough fight for Dane, make no mistake. Not because he doesn't have the skill, it's just longswords are a bit crap versus plate armor and an opponent like Gregor, especially if you're honorable and don't want to fight dirty like some of our other picks would. However, this guy is legendary. If anyone's got the skill to capitalize on the Mountain's blueprint with a longsword, dance around, tie the Mountain out, close the distance, and find those gaps while keeping his head on his shoulders, all with grace, style, and honor, it's the Sword of the Morning. And our third pick of the Will Nots, Strong Belwas. Our obligatory lightning pick because he's a book-only character, Belwas is an absolute legend of a fighter, and just a legend of a character in general, really. Instead of breaking down into meticulous detail why his weapons and armor aren't a good choice for facing Gregor, we're just going to state the fucking obvious. Belwas has an OCD-driven rule about letting every opponent cut him once before he kills them. The thing is, Gregor doesn't really slash and cut his opponents so much as he cleaves them into 2 pieces, especially if they don't have any armor, which Belwas does not. It's generally accepted that one swing from the Mountain equals death for anyone not covered head to toe in plate armor. Do we really have to explain why Belwas would be the last person we'd want as our champion in the whole world and history of A Song of Ice and Fire? As much as I'd love to see Belwas take a dump on Gregor's head, it just ain't happening. Sorry dude, I wish it wasn't so. And our fourth champion we'd feel safe with, Jaime Lannister before he lost his hand. Even Jaime's enemies acknowledge he's perhaps the greatest swordsman ever. Well, before losing his hand, that is. Much like Dane, this comes down to the fact Jaime is in peak human condition, notably strong and exceptionally quick, and is so overwhelmingly skilled in his weapon that he can make it work against the monster despite it being a suboptimal choice. As one of the most talented warriors ever, Jaime will have the mountain's blueprint, and leverage his agility and movement speed to wear the mountain down a piece at a time. Part of the Golden Three, George R. R. Martin considers untouchable when it comes to swordsmanship. Jaime, as long as he takes the measured approach and doesn't let his arrogance and sense of fair play blind him, will find that opening and get his sword into one of those gaps. The odds of his arrogance getting the better of him is also small, as the show only quote here, but it's almost guaranteed Gregor is one of the three men that gives a yet-to-be-humbled Jaime pause. So he definitely won't fuck around and find out when it comes to the mountain and get that blade straight into Gregor's eye slit the first opportunity he gets. Like Dane, it won't be easy for him. He'll have to make use of the mountain's blueprint for smaller fighters, but I'd be placing all my gold dragons plus my land and keep on the Kingslayer to triumph. And our fourth fighter who we certainly won't be placing any money on, Jaime Lannister, after he lost his hand. Now, Jaime isn't the worst fighter in the world with one hand and does pull some pretty badass moves, especially in the show, but he's less than a shadow of his former self. Enough so that Bronn and not fucking Euron can make sport of him and... I know I suggested it, but I can't do it, Tom. Let's at least try to be serious. No one would even consider this a contest. Our actual fourth pick for Kant is Victarion Greyjoy. Now, on paper, Vic seems like a damn good match for Gregor. He's big, he's strong, he wears full plate, has the sense to carry a shield, and a battle axe is not the worst weapon in the world for can opening in the slightest. But everything Vic does, Gregor just kind of does better. It's a brute versus a brute, and in this kind of matchup, the bigger brute often wins. Gregor's got the size, strength, and reach advantage with his weapon, as Victarion's battle axe is paired with a shield, meaning it's unlikely to be a poleaxe. Don't get me wrong, if Vic can get close enough to clonk Gregor on the head a few times with his axe, he might be in with a shot, but he's got to get close enough, and I just don't see that happening without Gregor doing something equally lethal before it. Victarion's fight with Talbot Seri also hurts our views on his chances, as it's kind of indicative of Victarion's fighting skill itself not being all that. Victarion struggled with Talbot, and in the end employed what you could call desperation tactics to win the fight. Don't want to hate on Talbot, he's probably decent, but he's kind of a nameless scrub who Gregor would likely use as nothing but a warm-up fight for the main event. I like Vic, and was genuinely like, yeah, fuck Gregor, this guy will mince him when you guys suggested him in the comments, but the more I tried to build an argument for Can, the more I realized he probably can't. Sorry guys, and sorry Vic, please don't throw me overboard. And our last pick for those who we think can, Janos Slynt's friends in the capital. What can I say? They are powerful friends. Bet you thought I was kidding when I said this would make it into the next one, eh, Crom? No brainer, really. And our final pick of those destined to die, Ser Jorah Mormont. A rather popular pick from our comments section, and like Ramsay, I kind of see the logic. Jorah is a fine knight with a good chunk of experience as a mercenary, and the Dothraki themselves do respect him for his swordsmanship, so he's got to be above average at least. However, whether past his prime or in his youth, he's not that something special you need to be to bring low an 8 feet tall, 400-pound monster, especially when that monster is no slouch at fighting either. The time we saw Jorah fight a very skilled opponent in the books and show, we saw him leveraging his opponent's unfamiliarity with Westerosi arms and armor. The show was very kind to him too, as in the books he actually gets quite a nasty wound on his hip and ear before killing the Blood Rider. Then after that, it's mainly his show-only performance in the fighting pit, and while he fights admirably and shows us he's got some serious grit and tricks up his sleeve, especially since he's quite past his prime against younger opponents and a little dilapidated from the recent living conditions, it's clear without a full suit of plate armor around him he's definitely nothing to write home about on the skill front. Like you could see with everyone's favorite Grandpa Knight. Why'd you kill in D&D? Why? It's just not enough to give him a shot against Gregor. Dealing with a plate-covered knight is Gregor's 9 to 5, and like we keep hammering home, you need peak human physicality, especially speed and agility, and top-tier skill in swordsmanship to even stand a chance if you aren't in the Mountains League size-wise. Has Jorah got this? No. No, he hasn't. Poor guy can't catch a break with the ladies or in battle. But of course, if you've watched our original vid, you know there's a fighter missing from the can section. It's our final pick and safest bet, and that is King Bobby B when he was young. Look, I'm sorry. I know we've been going hard on the Bobby bias lately, and the joke has run its course. But he was our safest bet in the original vid, and he still remains so for this one. This is the last time, I promise. This guy in his youth is irrefutably the best optimized warrior to fight Gregor. He's not as tall, granted, and combined with his weapon, he definitely doesn't have the reach advantage. But he has everything else he needs, from his physicality to his fighting mentality, all the way down to his toolkit to be the perfect anti-mountain fighter. Like Sandor and the Great John, he's one of those rare few blessed with the size and strength to stand in the mountain's league of physicality, removing the need for pure evasion and allowing him to straight up meet Gregor's strength with his own, meaning with the help of his plate armor, he'll likely be able to tank any of Gregor's sword swings that aren't going for the head. Again, something only in the realms of capability for Sandor and Great John also. Even 1-1 can't do this since he lacks armor. A lot of people may counter this by saying Gregor's greatsword is a great anti-armor weapon since it's a primarily battlefield weapon, but the truth is it's still rather suboptimal. It's far better than a standard longsword due to it being bigger and heavier and therefore having more funk behind it, especially in Gregor's hands, but it's still a sword. And this is where Bobby has Gregor licked. Unlike every other fighter we've talked about, Robert doesn't need to make Gregor's strengths work against him by forcing the mountain to fatigue under the weight of his armor and sword. He's the only guy with a weapon that just straight up bypasses Greg's armor and makes it nothing but dead weight. Every hit Robert lands on any zone of Gregor's body is going to really fucking hurt at the minimum. In the right spots, bones may even break, and of course, one good clonk to the head and Gregor's done, helmet or not. Even Gregor's shield is one big piece of dead weight that might at best buy Gregor a couple of hits, as like we mentioned in our warrior video, shields, or more accurately a shield arm, don't really like feeling the force of a regular warhammer repeatedly striking it. Forget about Robert's unrealistically large chunk of metal that dwarfs a real historical warhammer sevenfold bashing it. Robert's weapon, combined with his physicality, ferocity and skill, gives Robert the strength, speed, and answer for that armor that no other fighter can bring, making him without a doubt the optimum choice if you need a champion to face down this monster for you. Okay Tom, okay, I'm done. I'll stop hyping Bobby up now and let him rest in peace. And the mountain, that fucker can rest in pieces. Or more accurately as a fine paste on the floor after Robert's done with him. Number 5, Brienne of Tarth. Look, I love Brienne, and I'm even slightly in favor of her show counterpart possibly being able to put the mountain down. But the fact of the matter is, while she most certainly has skill and speed that trumps the mountain, she kind of leverages the same advantages as him. That being heavy armor and savagely closing the gap where she can leverage her strength, and the mountain just outclasses her in this regard. Now, a lot of people will point to the show-only feat of her defeating the Hound in single combat, and since the Hound can beat Gregor, surely that means Brienne can too. But here's the thing, A beats B doesn't automatically mean that A beats C, and I don't want to take the wind out of that victory, but the Hound was starving, tired and exhausted from sleeping rough, wounded and quite possibly on the verge of sepsis thanks to his noble quest for chicken. Needless to say, she didn't beat the Hound at 100%. It's not totally crazy to put a gold dragon on her, but we just don't think Brienne's got it.
It's time to drown our sorrows.
Number 4, Jon Snow. Now, Jon in the show is a bit of a living legend to the people of the North, but here's the thing with legends. They are often exaggerated. Jon as we see him is definitely a talented and well-trained fighter, but from best we can tell, he is just good and nothing more. The 2 times he fought a worthy opponent, no, Ramsay wasn't worthy, he was stage-managed, or as was the case with Carl fucking Tanner, he lost and required bailing out. Book Jon is still just a 16-year-old boy, not even fully developed. Needless to say,
You know nothing.
when it comes to dealing with the mountain and would be flattened. Number 3, Jaqen Hagar. Could Jaqen kill Gregor? Sure. Could he kill Gregor in a fair 1v1? No, not really. Much like Arya, Jaqen is a master-trained assassin. The whole point of an assassin is to kill your opponent when they are unaware and at a disadvantage. It's an equally impressive, but totally different skill set to that of a warrior. He's got some insane reflexes, and I'm more than confident a man can handle themselves in a fight when necessary. But that's not enough when you want to topple the mountain. At number 2, it's Arya Stark. Right, let's clear one thing up first. Arya is my personal favorite character of the whole series. If I could fiddle it so she could win, I bloody well would. Now Arya is a badass, no question, and a prestigious fighter, but in a fair 1v1 she doesn't have a single significant advantage over Gregor, and is heavily disadvantaged in every regard except skill and speed. We look at that Brienne fight and think Arya is unbeatable, but there's a few things to note. Number 1, they were having a friendly spar, not a fight to the death. And number 2, even if it were a fight to the death, Arya has a valid target to strike at with Needle in Brienne's exposed head. The Mountain in both mediums wears armor head to toe, and here is the problem. Even if she closes the considerable gap in reach, which if you've ever done HEMA you'll know is much harder than it looks, her weapon is not designed to go through plate, and she can't afford to go for any gap but the eye slit as she needs an immediate kill shot, otherwise she's grabbed and crushed. The odds of landing such a strike without an equally lethal retaliation are not good.
Never tell me the odds.
At the end of the day, Arya's skill set is that of an assassin, not a warrior. And at number 1, our final and most popular suggestion is Khal Drogo. And because it was so popular, we're going to go a little bit more in depth than normal. Now, is Drogo more skilled than Gregor? Yes. Could Drogo dance circles around Gregor? Sure, Drogo is by far a better warrior than Gregor can ever hope to be, but this is a matter of toolkits and not outright skill or power. Dothraki have shown they are not all too accustomed to dealing with plate armor, and while Drogo is a cut above other Dothraki, Gregor's plate is a cut above other plate. Add to this Drogo's weapons, the Arak, his daggers, and his bow. The Arak has sod all reach, which is a major problem in itself, and it has even less anti-armor utility than Arya's Needle, lacking the capacity to thrust. The daggers are only good if the Khal can get close enough to get them in the Mountain's eye slit without being bisected, and while I don't doubt Drogo can place an arrow in the plate helmet's eye slit, he isn't afforded the distance and time required to line up that kind of shot in a fair 1v1, and the Dothraki don't use armor-piercing longbows, so eye slit is his only shot, or maybe the neck.
But Drogo would just do what Bronn and Oberyn suggested and dance around him and get him tired and put him on his back.
Look guys, the Mountain is not a cat who chases shiny objects. He chased Oberyn around because 1, the Viper was taunting him and winding him up, something I'm sure Bronn was also planning to do if he had to take the fight, and 2, Oberyn had a long-range weapon that could hurt him if not careful. To put it simply, it was in the Mountain's best interest to pursue. Drogo can't wind Gregor up because he can't speak Westerosi, and his weapon choices give the Mountain no incentive to close the distance. The reverse can actually happen to Drogo. Gregor can wait for Drogo to tire himself out trying to close the gap and get in and out and pierce his armor while prioritizing defense of his head, and dispatch Drogo when he starts slowing down. Remember, the Mountain wields a greatsword with a lot of reach, and requiring a lot of energy to move in and out of range from. We don't think it's impossible for the Khal to win, but everything favors the Mountain a whole lot more. People sleep on the Mountain. We see him as this big, slow, dumb brute trope that anyone with a bit of skill can take down. But here's the thing, he's kind of a subversion of that trope and a little bit of a realistic depiction of it. He's a fully trained knight with skills to match. He's not dumb, in combat at least. He's got good warrior instincts according to several sources. And he's not slow. He's quicker than a man his size ought to be. Let's remember that the guy who beat him was a well-trained prodigy in the qualities of fighting intelligence and cunning, and even he kept his distance, played it safe, and had long planned his tactic before ever stepping into the arena. So let's kick this off with our first fighter who can. Number 1, Dario Noharis. A champion of the fighting pits and possessing of almost infinite cunning, Dario is not one to mess with, even if you're the Mountain. It cannot be understated just how much Dario likes being alive, and as such he has no compunctions about fighting dirty. He's also very experienced in fighting bigger opponents, at least according to himself, and knows the tactics for a smaller guy to beat a bigger guy. It'll be a long, bloody, drawn-out fight, with plenty of dirt and whatever else Dario has to hand thrown in the Mountain's eyes. But we think the blue-haired rogue has got that dog in him to win, albeit unfairly.
Let me kill this man for you.
Very well.
And our first pick of fighters who can't, Grey Worm. Now, Show Grey Worm is way more badass in comparison with his book counterpart, and you'd think that because his primary skill is with the weapon Oberyn used, that would net him a win, right? Well, no. Grey Worm is a soldier, not a duelist, and there is a massive difference. The Unsullied take their inspiration from ancient Greek Spartans and the like, and fight most effectively when in a coordinated unit, presenting a phalanx of shields and spears. On his own, Grey Worm has respectable showings in single combat against civilian insurgents, mindless zombies, and demoralized nameless Lannister soldiers, but he's never fought an opponent that comes even close to the Mountain's level single-handed. Add to the fact he's missing, well, we'll know what,
I'm as anatomically impaired as a kendo.
and he'll be quite a bit weaker than your average biological male, which is not good when your opponent has such a strength advantage in the first place. Nope, Grey Worm would be worm food were he to try and tackle the Mountain without his bros backing him up. Number 2, our second pick of fighters who can, Sir Bronn of the Blackwater, son of...
You wouldn't know him.
Sure, Bronn can do no wrong. Even Drogon couldn't put that dashing scoundrel down. But Book Bronn is no slouch either. He's a cut above most and pragmatic as they come when it comes to combat. What makes Bronn so dangerous is he knows how good he is, but is fully aware of his limitations, which he compensates for with a healthy dose of ruthlessness and dishonorable yet practical tactics.
You don't fight with honor.
No. He did.
Now, his refusal to fight the Mountain is often a point held against him being able to triumph, but it was really more to do with self-interest. Cersei's offer was simply better than Tyrion's and far less life-threatening.
If you want me to kill the Mountain for you, it better be a damn big castle.
But that conversation, in the show at least, also pointed out that Bronn would have taken the fight had Tyrion made a better offer, and he knew the exact tactic to beat the Mountain that Oberyn would later employ to victory. Well, almost. Now, as rightly pointed out, one mistake, and Bronn is dead. But we have faith in our favourite sellsword getting the Mountain off his feet. Now we just need to offer him a big enough castle. And our second pick of fighters who can't? Loras Tyrell. Now this is so much more closely run than you might think. Despite his soft, pretty boy demeanor, Loras is up there as one of the best fighters in Westeros, and is totally worthy of your respect. He also doesn't have a signature weapon like most fighters, so he may take in a weapon that's got good reach and anti-armor capabilities like a polearm, not to mention he wears full plate, which at least gives him a chance to shrug off glancing blows and take a few hits. He's got the skill and he's got the speed to keep up with the more brutish Gregor, but he is so firmly outmatched in strength, reach, and defensive capabilities that those advantages become less than equalizers, especially against the book version of the Mountain, who not only wields a greatsword, but also carries a thick oaken shield as a defense redundancy should Loras slip past the sword. His loss to Brienne in the show also doesn't help make his likelihood of winning look favorable, as Brienne's fighting style is essentially the Mountain Light edition. I wouldn't count Loras out, especially if he's smart enough to take in a weapon with some reach or anti-armor utility, but my gold dragons would most certainly be going on the Mountain. A quick honourable mention, we were going to throw in his brother Garland as one who we think can, but since he's book only, we didn't want to confuse those who have only seen the show. But for our book reading watchers, we think Garland can do it as he's essentially a better, more experienced version of Loras. Number 3, our third pick of fighters who can, the great Jon Umber, the only guy besides his brother who can come even close to matching the Mountain's size. The great Jon Umber is speculated to be one of the physically strongest people in Westeros. Not only that, but he's a war vet who's racked up a lot of experience fighting actual warriors and not unarmed peasants, and he's earned his scars on the battlefield as well as wielding a greatsword bigger than ice, so he's got the reach covered. When it takes 8 men to subdue you when you're unarmed and plaster blind drunk, and you still kill one and wreck the rest shit on your way down, you've got to be an absolute savage in a fair fight. He's got the strength, he's got the reach, and he's one of the North's best. In our opinion, all things considered, Gregor won't be used to fighting someone who can stonewall him with his own game, and will be bashed to death by the great Jon's big, ugly piece of steel. And our number 3 dead meat? Ramsay Bolton. Now, I've seen this addressed on a couple of forums here and there, and I will be honest, I can kind of see the logic behind the thinking. Ramsay is psychopathically intelligent and cunning, not a genius by a long stretch, but no fool either when it comes to battle and single combat. Not to mention his show iteration is covered in plot armor so thick that it took the actual Chosen One, I will never let that go D&D, of the universe to defeat him in one-on-one combat. But here's the thing, he's noted to not actually be that great of a warrior, and relies on his fearlessness, his savagery and strength in order to win. Now, we don't know how tall Ramsay is, only that he's a bit taller than Theon. But since no special mention is made of his height, even the most generous estimations are going to put him close around the 6-foot mark. So yeah, Ramsay's fearlessness, savagery and strength are going to do jack against Gregor, who is equally savage, much stronger just by virtue of height and mass, and has an insane reach advantage. No mention is made of Ramsay possessing exceptional or even competent agility either, which is a must-have to play the long game. So even if Ramsay has the cunning to employ Oberyn and Bronn's tactic, he doesn't have the physicality to pull it off. For once, I'm actually cheering for the Mountain. Squash that skin-flaying freak, Greg! Now our fourth pick of fighters who can, 1-1 the Giant. Too many people commented this for us not to include it. Is it cheating? Yes. Yes, it is. Do we care? No. No, we do not. If only for the immensely satisfying image our imagination conjures at seeing the Mountain getting an extremely poetic taste of his own medicine as the little person for a change, as 1-1 flattens him with nothing but a tree trunk. Now, to be fair, if Gregor fought smart, he might actually be able to take on 1-1, who doesn't wear armor to protect his squishy bits. But odds of 1-1 not just dropping his tree trunk and grabbing the slight hill and crushing him to a pulp when he tries to start dancing around are slim to none. Another honorable mention goes to the Night King, who was also spammed to death in our comment sections. Unless Gregor's packing some Valyrian steel or obsidian, there is obviously nothing he can do against the King of the Undead, because, well, it's obvious. Let's throw in Drogon here for good measure, Tom. Got to let our commenters know we appreciate them. Back to the land of serious suggestions. Our fourth pick of fighters who can't is, Syrio Farrell. Look, Syrio is a goddamn badass.
And you will be speaking to me with more respect.
Most characters wouldn't be able to fend off multiple opponents with a real sword, let alone a wooden practice one. And I really don't want to put him on this list because, like Arya, he's a personal favorite of mine. But much like our views regarding Khal Drogo, this is a matter of incompatible toolkits rather than a testament of skill. We always work under the assumption with these what-if trial by combats that the character will take in their signature weapon if it's been disclosed. Water dancing swords haven't been described beyond the fact they are more slender than longswords with a more favourable thrusting point. Hopefully about to get my Hema guys in here to back me up, but that could be, at best, a rapier and at worst, a small sword. Both of which are specialized dueling weapons, sure, but they are intended for unarmored dueling and aren't particularly good against plate armor, let alone armor as thick as Gregor's. Syrio might be able to dance around, he might be able to close the gap, but he's going to struggle to finish Gregor off with a kill shot. Getting a sword into a hostile opponent's armor joints, armpits, neck, or eye slit is so much harder than most of you realize, especially if your opponent is fighting back and you can't wrestle them to the ground, even for a master swordsman. And like any lightly or unarmored agility fighter, one mistake and he's dead, and I just don't see him having skill comparable to Oberyn, who is in contention for the greatest overall fighter alive at the time period.
Have they told you who I am?
Some dead man.
Or that pragmatic ruthlessness and disregard for honor that Bronn possesses. Sorry, Syrio. I still think you're badass, though.
And there is only one thing we say to death. Not today.
And our fifth and final pick for those who can't, Tormund Giantsbane. His name may make you think otherwise, and he's another personal favorite of mine, but Jon's best bro hasn't got it in him to claim the name Tormund Mountainsbane. He's bloody strong, and while he may be a touch rough around the edges with a wild, chaotic, almost bestial approach to combat, Tormund is an incredibly skilled fighter in a keep it simple kind of way. He's also got an incredible warrior spirit, and his determination to keep going even when he feels he's lost is admirable, and puts him firmly in the camp of one of the wildlings' best. But none of that can help him versus Gregor. Tormund is Gregor's perfect victim. Both his weapons and fighting style play right into the Mountain's hands. Torment is a wild brawler of a fighter who wields pretty short weapons, and from what we see, he seems to favor rushing in with a high quantity over quality of savagely fast cuts and thrusts, which would do nothing but glance off the Mountain's armor. With no armor of his own, he's also one swing of the Mountain's greatsword away from death, and doesn't seem to have the tactical head on him to play the long game. He'd rush in and get chopped in half almost immediately. I love the bastard, but he's probably got the smallest chance of the lot at overcoming the monster. I believe we were going to sprinkle in some hot D to be topical, weren't we? So, our final pick and safest bet, it's Sir Kristen Cole. Nope, I can't do it. I am not putting that whiny simp on this list, no matter how skilled he is. Plus, I think there's someone far more worthy who we're forgetting, Tom. A knight of great repute, with legendary skill, the courage of a lion, and the most noble heart who could cut through the mountain like carving a cake. Oh, that's right, Barristan the Bold. Now, this was only really suggested by
literally everyone.
You mean everyone?
He may not be as spry as he was in his youth, but Barristan Selmy is still debatably the greatest knight alive during the Game of Thrones, with only the legendary Arthur Dayne and a two-handed Jaime being considered his equals when it comes to skill. While not optimum, he also possesses solid equipment for facing down Gregor, with Selmy's full plate as the MVP, seeing as how it's the only way you're going to even stand a chance to survive a blow from the Mountain, though admittedly he could do with a longer sword. But unlike other subpar anti-armor weapons we've mentioned in this series like Drogo's Arak and Arya's Needle, while not optimal, longswords can be effective against armor if in the hands of someone who knows how to leverage it. And well, it's in the best possible hands in this case. The only reason Gregor might last a few minutes is due to Barristan getting on in years, though as we see in both the books and the show, his reflexes are still sharp as ever. Combined with his patience, cunning and wisdom, Barristan may not have the ideal tools like Bobby B, may not have the ideal tactic like Oberyn, but he has the ideal fighting spirit to bring low this beast. It would only be a matter of time, but the one who disgraces the title of knight would be brought low by the one who is a paragon of it. As the old adage goes, beware the old man in a profession where men usually die young.
I'm glad we never met on the field, Sir Barristan. As is my wife. I don't think the widow's life would suit her.
Before we wrap up, I just wanted to say a quick thank you to you guys for being a player in this 3-part series of ours. We've really enjoyed having the discussions with you over the course of it. I'm sure my good pal Tom will put a poll up to help us pick the next character to pit against their contemporaries, and we can have a whole new discussion about a whole new character, hopefully. So thank you, we really appreciate the support, the agreement, the disagreement, and just engagement as a whole, really. Thanks, guys. And that's our take. What did we get right, what did we miss, and what did we get wrong? I'm sure you'll have no problem telling us. Thanks for watching.